Welcome to the People's National Congress Reform Press Conference for February 28, 2025. I am your moderator, Shanika Haynes. Joining today's presser is Mr. Sherwin C. Benjamin, General Secretary of the People's National Congress Reform, and Mr. Elson Lowe, Treasurer of the PNCR and economist. Today's press statement will be read in two parts, and we will begin with a reading from the General Secretary.
Thank you, Shanika, and good morning. PNCR calls on the PPP to support the call for GCOM to urgently invite experts on biometrics before the next elections. Bharat Jagdeo continues to grasp at straws in resisting the use of biometric technology to register and verify the identity of voters. Recently, he claimed that such system would disenfranchise voters as it would give presiding officers too much power. This is the same Bharat Jagdeo who, after the PPP's defeat in 2015, aggressively demanded not only fingerprint biometric, but voter verification, but also electronic voting. In other words, he and his party were even advocating for voting without ballot paper. His current criticism against the digital biometrics are therefore two-faced and devious. His intentions are geared only toward maintaining an election system his party can exploit through fraud and other illegalities. On Jagdeo's specific charge against presiding officers having the power to disenfranchise voters, no such fear is warranted once all parties support GCOM to ensure adequate laws are enshrined, procedures are clearly outlined, officers are adequately trained, and parties can afford scrutineers to cover all polling stations. Guyanese now are, however, overstraught with the claim that and counterclaims from their political parties and GCOM itself, the merits of digital biometrics. Dispute and knowledge grasp over, however, could be readily resolved by employing the services of a reputable international firm of experts to advise GCOM and the nation about all the relevant aspects of the technology, including best practices and the implementation of timeframes. We see no difficulty in recruiting such expertise as early as next month. If the PPP is serious about fair and credible elections in 2025, let them immediately throw their support behind this initiative. If they wish to show that they are serious about the demands made in 2015 about digital biometrics, they will then allow their GCOM commissioners to join ours in support. We note also that Jagdeo's allegation that the opposition is pushing for cameras in polling places. We are not. The record will show that the PNCR and leader of the opposition, Mr. Aubrey Norton, at his last press conference early in last month, rejected the idea. He highlighted that the potential risk of PPP using the presence of cameras in polling places to further manipulate and intimidate voters. We hope we have cleared the air on that.
Thank you. Mr. Elson.
The uncertainties surrounding the completion of the gas energy project are cause for great concern. The announcement of a third delay of the beleaguered gas energy project came as no great surprise. With a project completion date now set sometime in 2026, it is clear that the PNCR-APNU, as the next government, will have to save and open the project. Let us remind the nation that the gas energy project was fully conceptualized by the APNU-AFC government but has since been badly mismanaged by the PUP regime. As we highlighted previously, the only way now for the PUP to deliver on its promise to halve electricity costs this year is to approach the National Assembly to fund a direct subsidy. Guyanese should therefore expect further frantic plundering of the Natural Resource Fund and the rushed passage of a large supplementary budget of tens of billions of dollars. Vice President Bharat Jagdeo's recent waffling and deflection about the financial implications of his latest delay smack of incompetence and murkiness. He noted that the government is still assessing the cost of the delay, including related management costs, but gave no estimate of the cost of the previous delays. These costs must all be accounted for and made public. The project is already 2 to 3 times its initial costs and will significantly impact the PNC-RUPNU government's first budget in 2026. Similarly, the not one but 2 arbitration suits against the government in relation to the project carry a series of financial risks. This includes the suit amounts themselves, which appear to amount to roughly 100 million US, as well as the ongoing legal costs of the arbitration proceedings. We remind Guyanese that it is under the PUP's watch that there have been a series of stumbling blocks and complications which have led to this contentious situation. If this project were more closely monitored and the appropriate site studies done before it was put into motion, none of these issues would have emerged. Recently, the government has begun to speak about a second gas energy project at the same Wales location that has proven to be so problematic. While this is intended to be privately funded, the same concerns remain. The cost of soil remediation needs to be calculated and factored in to any agreement with a private power plant investor to avoid potential disputes. Furthermore, there must be thorough due diligence of all shortlisted bidders. For any bidder that is a specially created consortium, all beneficial owners must be clearly identified to expose any PUP nepotism and cronyism. Proven experience in the construction and operation of such power plants must be a requirement. The entire process must be transparent and must duly respect the people's right to know. As the next government, we will have to closely assess and manage these projects to ensure they do not spiral out of control. Guyana does not need another Skeldon disaster in which billions are wasted with no returns on investment. Thank you.
Thank you. At this time, I open the floor for questions on the first statement. Ms. Svetlana?
Good day, Svetlana Marshall for the resource. To the GS, you spoke about GCOM inviting or urging GCOM to have a next further experts come to look at the possibility of having enhanced biometrics ahead in preparations for elections. I think I asked this question last week, but I'm not sure that it was answered. How soon could you see the PNC writing GCOM and having a face-to-face meeting with them to express the party's concern?
Well, the opposition has commissioners on GCOM, and I think they have ventilated that. In terms of asking the party to write, we can do so within the next week. We can do so within the next week because we believe the call for the invitation for experts to deal with biometrics is in fact a just one. And we are of the view as well that these elections are critical. In 2015, as we have said in our press statement, the PPP called for the use of biometrics, and now they are distancing themselves from that call. It can only go to say that they are, one, disingenuous, and two, they're hypocritical in their call back in 2015, because the results of the 2020 elections, which they enjoy, has proven, fact A, that there were in excess of 40 boxes with issues, vote impersonation, etc. B, the observer missions, both local and overseas, including CARICOM, indicated that the list that we're currently using lends to voting for impersonation and possible fraud. And whilst they were the aftermath of the March second poll 2020, the PPP themselves were championing the set call. But now the roles are reversed. They're occupying the seats of government. They're resisting vehemently the use of biometrics. And that in itself, it's not only duplicitous, but it's hypocrisy.
You mentioned that the opposition has commissioners on that commission. Do you think that is sufficient? Because we've seen cases where proposals put by the opposition nominated commissioners would have been shut down by the chair or by a majority. So are you saying that that is sufficient and the party is not looking to engage GCOM on a one-on-one level?
But we have been engaging. We have been having a series of protest action every Tuesday outside of GCOM, calling for biometrics and the revamping of the existing voters list. To answer the substantive question, I did say that we are prepared to and we will write GCOM on this matter.
To meet with GCOM.
To meet with.
Mr. Lowe? You spoke about the gas energy project. As an economist, what would you say would be the financial implications for, a third delay, if I could say third, or for the delay?
Well, there's a couple factors here to consider. The first is that, as was mentioned by the Vice President, there is a direct cost, which is the further management of this project. That needs to be made clear because obviously the taxpayer will bear the burden of paying for that particular cost. But additionally, and I think this is where Guyanese are really concerned, is that so long as that project is not operational and not properly functioning, we are looking again at a potential blackout crisis in this country because, of course, the country is growing, its power needs are growing, and the government has tied its future completely to this gas energy project, as opposed to providing more additional long-term solutions. So what that means is that there's potentially a severe economic cost to the country if the gas energy project does not come online in the form, first of all, of blackouts. The next thing that is important to note is that the project was intended, or at least the government's intention, is to have the cost of electricity via this project. Now, if the government is not going to be able to do that with this project within the latter half of this year, then it means that a very large subsidy is going to have to be produced in the tens of billions of dollars, it would appear. So that means that there's an additional cost that will have to be borne by the Treasury in order to allow this to happen. And the government needs to be upfront with the people of Guyana that there is a substantial cost that will have to be borne, and to come to Parliament to deal with that. Otherwise, what's going to happen is Guyanese consumers will continue to pay high prices for no reason other than the incompetence of the government.
Thank you. Questions on the first statement? Mr. Adam Harris.
This is a question on the gas to shore. No, I've been hearing a lot of figures about the cost. Mr. Lowe, can you give us the latest cost that the government has declared for this project?
Thank you very much for your question, Mr. Harris. What has happened is we've seen the project cost escalate. I believe the last cost was over $2 billion. However, there are a couple of things that will need to be factored in, which is why we're calling for clarity. The first is, what is the real cost of these delays as it concerns the management of these projects? The second is, what is the cost of these legal, these arbitration fights? As you noted, there's more than one of them. So what is the cost for that? And then the last is, if Guyana loses these arbitrations, what is the cost for that? That will amount, it seems to be, to 100 million US at minimum, perhaps much more than that. So that needs to be clarified. We speak now in Guyana as if 100 million US is not much money, but we must recall the size of that money within the history of our public investments. We must recall that is half of Skeldon's initial cost. So these are the types of things that are vital questions. And ultimately, we cannot deliver to the Guyanese people a good standard of living unless we are able to contain these types of costs. What we're also trying to warn here is that when it comes to a second plant, which the government is saying might be privately funded, if we have a similar scenario, then that one will also run far ahead of, will be much more expensive than it really was intended to be. So that's an additional cost. It to us is not acceptable that we've seen 9 months, I believe, of 9 months spent on soil remediation for a site that the PPP says was the best site or says was a good site. And then we've not seen the government subsequently go in, conduct appropriate studies, and provide clarity as to the nature of that site so that when an additional contractor comes in, the initial conditions are well known. Rather, the government has been dodging the issue, pretending that there's nothing wrong with the soil, pretending that there's no issue at all. When this could come up in a further arbitration suit. I've been to that area myself, and it does indeed look to be a very swampy area. It is historically been an area used for the kind of agriculture that is it's not farmland. So to me, the government has put itself into this quagmire and can't seem to find its way out of it. We want to remind the Guyanese people that when an initial feasibility study was done for this particular project, that site rated as one of the lowest rated sites. It was not selected as an ideal site. And so the government, rather than remedying their mistake, is doubling down on the mistake, which could potentially lead to all manner of complication.
And while we're on that, you talk about the site and that you visited. Now, during the budget debate, the government said that this project will have come to an end in August this year. But when you went to the site, what was the quality, what was the level of the work done to have this site ready if it had to be completed in August?
Now, Adam, admittedly, I went to the site some time ago, so it's not a recent visit. However, when I had gone at that time, it seemed to me there was a lot of work needed because it seemed that they were still heavily engaged in soil remediation efforts. A lot of time has passed. You've heard them say for months on end. I think it was another 6 months after I went to the site, they were still engaged in soil remediation efforts. And now there is an arbitration dispute over the question of the necessity for these efforts. Now, ultimately, it is, I think, incumbent upon the government, given that this has resulted in such a delay, given that this has resulted in such contention, that they carry out a proper study of the area and the soil in the area. We want to remind the Guyanese public that the Vice President said about the possibility of using Palmyra as the site for this particular project. The soil there is swampy. It seems to me that the PPP, what they've been doing is they walk around the country, they take a look, oh, this doesn't look good, that doesn't look good, rather than actually hiring appropriate technical personnel to evaluate these sites. And so what you got is a hope and a prayer situation where they just put these projects wherever it is they feel like putting them without carrying out the correct analysis. And it looks like they're going to go and do the same thing for a second time. This is extremely, extremely alarming. And it means that the country may be in a tangle when it comes to these projects for some time. We as the next government will have to unwind such a tangle And therefore, we're calling on for the government to be transparent as to what is going on with this particular project. We've seen some remarks that they're going to try to speed up the project, but if this project is so delayed, we're very much concerned that it won't be put online in a hurry. Ultimately, as we said, this is not the type of project in which, given its scale, this kind of lack of transparency is acceptable. It is too vital, and it is a massive national investment.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. That being the case, from what you just said, it seems as though the site for the plant has been finalized. You said the government has been looking at Palmyra. Is this really the case, or are they still going ahead with Wales?
Well, what I'm saying is the government said that it chose Wales because it is a better site than places like Palmyra, where the ground is swampy. But here we have, as I said, as I visited the area, it is swampy ground. So we have the same thing here at Wales, which says to me that there has not been an actual technical study done to evaluate the appropriateness of the site. And what we're saying is, before you go and put yet another power plant, carry out a proper evaluation, make that clear to any contractor coming in, any new company coming in, so that they at least have a sense of the initial conditions of the site and can appropriately budget for it. If they don't do that, it is possible that we're going to have yet another legal dispute down the line. So rather than pretending that they made no error in the beginning, they need to rectify the error rather than compound the error. And that is what is going on. So they've doubled down on picking this site. They're going to continue to use this site. But if you're going to use the site, you have to acknowledge the problems with the site. And one of the things we would also highlight, Adam, is they said they want to build out an industrial park in the area. They want heavy industry in the area. You know what that means? That means that every single time a heavy industry is developed in the Wales area, we're going to have to go through the same song and dance over the question of the soil. If it took 9 months to remedy the soil, I can only imagine that other heavy manufacturing will take a similar amount of time to remedy the soil for that kind of manufacturing. The government needs to get a study done so that we can actually have some clarity regarding this. Otherwise, it's going to be on and on and on. We're going to have these disputes. It's not acceptable, and any sane government would, I think, at minimum, look to mitigate these types of risks.
Thank you. Any other questions?
All right, one last question. Do you have somebody else there?
No, go ahead.
No. Now, according to Member of Parliament David Patterson, the pipeline has already reached shore, and there is gas in the pipeline. Now, that would have a cost. Do we have any idea, or has there been any discussion or any information from the government about the cost of this pipeline lying there with the gas? Obviously, Guyana should be paying for it. Do we have an idea of what that cost is? What are we paying per year, per month, per day?
Yes, well, so I think to be clear, the pipeline is not filled with natural gas right now. It's filled with a different gas, but that is a waiting, a temporary measure while we wait on the project to be completed. It is interesting to note that the pipeline having been completed since last year, late last year, and the project now being pushed till to 2026, we've got an entire, in excess of a year of delay in which that pipeline is sitting there not being fully used. Now, of course, one would expect that capital having been outlaid to build this pipeline, the company would want to get their return based on the agreement. And so that is also, to us, a question as to where that cost is, what is that cost, number one, and how is that being financed? The government has not provided clarity on this in particular because they've refused to release the agreement between the operator, the Stabroek Block operator, and the government of Guyana regarding the supply of gas and those exact terms. So in order for us to know exactly how that is being paid for, what these contingencies are, we need to see that agreement. Otherwise, we wouldn't have a clear sense of it. We wouldn't have a clear sense of whether there's any variation for insurance purposes on this pipeline. You can imagine that a pipeline that's filled with natural gas might have a different insurance profile to a pipeline that's not filled with anything or filled with an inert gas or something like that. So those types of things need to be made clear to the Guyanese public. It is, I think, quite tragic that you've got a pipeline sitting there which can provide natural gas to the country, sitting idle for in excess of a year. That is, I don't know if you can find a better example of just poor planning and poor execution by the government. That they've got the pipeline sitting there, and presumably we will have to pay some costs for that pipeline. On the other hand, a government which had a bit of insight, a bit of foresight rather, would have been simultaneously building the fertilizer plant, which the government is now looking around for people to build, because that fertilizer plant could have been making use of some of the natural gas and the related facilities.
Thank you. We do apologize for the break. Of course, we know how it is as we were talking about the very issue. We received a blackout in our area here. I will allow Mr. Elson Lowe to finish up on the point that he was making, and then we'll proceed with the question.
Yes, as I was saying, Adam, and I think it is extremely ironic that just as we were talking about this electricity supply issue, we've got a blackout again in a country in which the government has expended so much money on power ship after power ship, claims that it has been upgrading the grid and improving the grid. Just shows really the pickle that our country is in, and how severe these problems continue to be due to total mismanagement. We want to take this opportunity to remind Guyanese that last year, February, we had said to the government that it needs to get additional power because of the growing consumption of the country, and that the government neglected to listen to us and then had to scramble for a power ship at something like double the cost that it would have incurred if it had gotten additional power when we had said that it needed to do that. So this is all a symptom of a government that is not planning effectively and is really manifestly incompetent. So as a consequence of that, we've not got a fertilizer plant built, which could have made use of this natural gas. We've not got the attendant facilities which would allow that fertilizer plant to function and so on been built out. We've got a pipeline lying idle while the country suffers from a blackout crisis that could have been alleviated if the government had managed this project better. This is really it's the worst of all worlds. You've got the pipeline there, you haven't got the means to make use of the pipeline, and you suffer from blackouts simultaneously.
Thank you. I'll open the floor and we'll take about 2 or 3 other questions. Ms. Sweatland.
My question's for the GS, Mr. Benjamin. Yesterday we saw a report, in fact, published by news source, that long-standing member of the PNCR, Ms. Vanessa Kisoon, would have resigned from the party. Could you tell us about the reason behind Ms. Kisoon's resignation? And would this signify a major loss for the party? Taking into account that this is an election year, would you be able to say maybe how many persons, senior members of the party, would have resigned, say, for last year and early this year?
Thank you for the question. I should indicate by saying, yes, we have received a letter of resignation from Ms. Kisoon. I think at this point in time, we're dealing with that as an internal matter. The reality is any resignation has to be dealt with from our standpoint as a serious issue. So much to say that we're dealing with it as an internal matter, and at the appropriate time, we'll make a detailed statement in respect of that. I cannot say offhand how many resignations from senior members we've received to date, but I note that there has been a resignation from Vanessa Kisoon.
Yeah.
Yes.
With regards to Ms. Kisoon, I know in the lead up to Congress, I think it was last year, there was a team of elders who, a panel, if I could use that term, was put together to address some concerns and allegations raised by Ms. Kisoon. Could you say if the work of those elders were ever completed?
Well, thank you again for the question, but you're asking me to veer into uncharted waters. As you were aware, I was not holding this role as I was, that I am now prior to then, and I wouldn't want to venture into. But I can certainly research, ask a question, and get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Did Vanessa Kisoon hold any executive position in Linden where she resided? The reason I ask that is since there is this registration, her resignation, would whatever position she held be affected?
Well, suffice to say, she is a councillor for the APNU on the municipality of Linden. And I don't think at this point in time a resignation will affect that office unless she of her own decides that she is going to resign as a councillor. I don't want to say that that is a position she will take. I think she knows that the importance of holding on to that. And like I've said, this matter will be dealt with internally at the party, by the party.
Thank you. So I have room for one other question. All right.
You don't want to house?
No, you can go ahead and you'll be my last.
All right. My question has to do with the series of final exercises that have been conducted. How have they been going? What's the feedback from the ground? When is there likely to be a series of public meetings in the various communities to enhance the final program?
Thank you very much, Adam, for that question. As you rightly said, the party is engaging on a series of fan-out exercises all across the country. The reception to the party has been good. The feel on the ground is that people are fed up of the PPP's incompetence, mismanagement, and misrule, and they can't wait to get rid of this incompetent government. In respect of the other aspect of the question, public meeting, plans are afoot to have those meetings start immediately. So we are going to roll out a series of those. As you've seen, when the leader visits, he will end with public meetings, as was the case in Region 1.
Thank you. I would like to thank our media personnel for joining today's press, and of course, I would like to thank our viewing audience and all our social media platforms for joining today's presser. I do hope that you have a wonderful weekend.